Welcome to this Accelerator session on measuring what matters. We all know that circular economy is a system change, which means it's big and it's complex. But how can we break it down into more tangible targets and indicators? And we also know that what we measure is what we get. So it is really important that we get these indicators and targets right, so they can guide our transition to really deliver benefits for the people and the planet. In the next hour, we'll be exploring together how we can measure what really matters and how our governments and our companies might work together to set the right metrics for circular economy. My name is Ke Wang. I'm the knowledge lead at the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy. And I will be the moderator for this session with a panel of distinguished speakers. We have today with us, Ms. Helen Metz. She's the Executive Vice President of the Materials Business at Royal DSM. We have Ms. Catherine Chevauché, sorry for my French. Catherine is wearing double hats today as the chair of the ISO Technical Committee on Circular Economy and also as the Circular Economy and Climate Manager at Suez. We have Mr. Jérôme Petry. He's a project leader of Circular Economy at the Ministry of Economy in Luxembourg. We have Ms. Olivier Chasset, the Policy Officer of Circular Economy at DG Environment in the European Commission. And last but not least, Mark de Witt, Director of Strategic Alliance at Circular Economy. And we have you, the audience. We'd love to hear from you. So please do share your questions, your ideas, your suggestions in the chat box. We'll be keeping an eye on them and we'll have time later in the session to discuss them. But let's first hear from our speakers. For all our speakers, I know you can talk on this topic for hours, but may I kindly, politely ask you to keep your remarks brief today, so we have time to hear from everyone and also our audience. And we know that circular economy indicator is a very active field. Many indicators have been developed or are being developed. If we dive into this vast space, these indicators can be divided at different economic levels. We have the supranational level, national, industry, companies. And today we have three representatives representing a leading example from three different levels. We have Olivier, representing supranational level from the Commission. We have Jérôme from the Luxembourg Ministry working at the national level. And we have Helen working at the company level. So let's hear from you what is going on at all these different levels. May I start with you, Olivier, first? You're on mute still.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to launch the discussion with the Circular Economy Action Plan, the CEAP, that you may have heard about. That's a communication from the European Commission. So the circular economy is at the core of the Commission's priorities, and it is clearly one of the pillars of the European Green Deal. The action plan adopted in 2020 proposes a model to reduce our consumption footprint and double Europe's circular material use rate, the CMU, within the next 10 years. The Commission has started to deliver on several CEAP initiatives. Among others, the Commission is currently working to present a set of innovative landmark proposals by the end of 2021. And in particular, I will emphasize on two mains. The first one is the Sustainable Products Initiative, to transform how we design products in Europe, to make them more circular and more resource efficient. This initiative is a flagship of the CEAP, but also more largely for the entire European Green Deal's implementation. The aim of this SPI, the so-called SPI, is to improve products' durability, reusability, upgradability, and reparability, to reduce carbon and environmental footprints, address the presence of hazardous chemicals in products, and increase their recycled content. This initiative will apply to a wide range of intermediate and consumer products. Second, there are legislative initiatives to empower consumers and tackle false green claims. The objective is for the citizens to contribute better to the circular economy and support sustainable consumption. Consumer will then be able to choose more easily green products and will be better protected against those products that are not so green, the false green claims. In particular, the proposal on green claims would cover claims made on any of the environmental impacts covered by the environmental footprint methods and on claims on all environmental performance. So these are the two main projects going on. And also in 2021, the Commission will put forward an initiative on sustainable textiles and propose the revision of the waste shipment regulation. Now I will I'm going to present the role of standards to support circular economy transition. Let me remind that standards are meant to clearly, commonly clarify accepted definitions, provide methods for measuring and testing, and finally, open markets to the safe use of new technologies. Within the efforts pursued by the CEAP, the European Commission considers harmonization and standardization an important aspect for advancing the uptake of circular economy. This is highly relevant for circular economy indicators, as we have seen many different valuable efforts emerge in recent years at different levels, with different degrees of compatibility and comparability. In this regard, the Commission will further develop and promote the use of circular economy indicators, building on the Bellagio principles for monitoring circular economy, the priorities of the CEAP 2020 and the views of stakeholders, including other institutions. In particular, the Commission will present a revised monitoring framework for the circular economy by 2021 to monitor progress in the EU and the 27 member states. The Commission is itself involved in the development of harmonized standards in general, including for circular economy, through the adoption of standardization requests to European standardization organizations and publication of harmonized standards meeting these requests. The importance of such harmonization and standardization has been evident from other fields than sustainable development, in which the EC has played an instrumental role. And I would like to give you 3 examples. The first one relates to energy-related products. The European standards complement the EU legislation supporting the eco-design and energy labeling regulations. They provide standards for methods to measure and assess whether products comply with regulatory requirements. In particular, the Joint Technical Committee, JTC, Senseneg JTC 10, on energy-related products, material efficiency aspects for eco-design, has developed standards to set forth methods to assess, among others, repair, reuse, and upgrade of energy-related products, or the production of reused components in energy-related products. The second example is with the European Plastic Strategy. It explicitly refers to European quality standards to increase confidence that recycled plastics meet manufacturer needs. There are also standards to calculate recycling rates and plastics recycling traceability. The third one is with the European Green Deal and the revised Circular Economy Action Plan that intend to make priority products such as smartphones and computers more durable and easier to repair. Standards are important to achieve this. Furthermore, the Commission will prepare a strategy on standardization this year. The strategy will evolve around the role of standardization in support of recovery, digital and green transition, and in building resilience, strategic autonomy, and technological sovereignty. And the lead DG for that is DG Grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivia. The Commission is really leading the way worldwide in a variety of policy instruments and frameworks for circular economy. Thank you. Jérôme, if I may turn to you. Luxembourg has launched its national circular economy strategy early this year, I believe in February. Could you maybe share with us what are the highlights in this strategy? And in particular, how can circular metrics play a role in this ambition?
Thank you, Kerr, and hello, everybody. Yes, as you just mentioned, in February 2021, the Luxembourgish government presented its first circular economy strategy for the country. It is driven by the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Energy and Special Planning, the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development, and the Ministry of Finance. The strategy, in fact, is axed around three major actions, which are define objectives and indicators, promote implementation projects, transparent communication, promote cross-border collaboration, create international visibility, and a close communication with all stakeholders. So the strategy has very high ambitions, and the main task remain how can this be set up successfully by involving all the necessary stakeholders. This will work by identifying relevant projects and initiatives around main circular economy business models, which are creating value, maintaining value, and recovering value. This identification will be split into the different topics of regulation, taxation, and knowledge management. We have already several actions and examples going on in Luxembourg, and the following ones are, for example, the product circularity datasheet, which aims to develop a common language for reporting circular properties of products along the value chain using a statement approach, which can flow bottom up, starting at the base material manufacturer. We also launched a study to determine how the emergence of circular business models can be supported by identifying the key enablers in finance and accounting to move away from a linear economy. We also started the first edition of the Circular Design Challenge. The first edition of last year was a really great success, and the call for contribution for the second edition is running right now and is being widened to a broader category of participants. We also have several projects going on in circular construction and mainly reconversion of former large industrial sites. Luxembourg is well known for its iron ore and steel making history, and several brownfields are available for future development projects. The success of Belval, including Luxembourg's university, is a big success, and there are other private and public projects embracing circular economy principles in order to create new neighborhoods for the future. And then we have also the circular hotspot city, led by the city of Wils, which is the first Luxembourgish city which has signed a circular city declaration and has adopted a plan of 30 major circular actions to be undertaken until 2030. And of course, several companies are starting to promote circular products and services and will continue to be at the forefront of the development of circular economy on the private level. The success of all these actions will remain a coherent reporting of circular data on products and also on the tracking of the actions put in place at public and private level. The transparency of this data will also be very important because it will generate more durability on products, reduce waste, and create better acceptance at the level of the consumer, who is more and more looking on its impact on nature, climate, and society. I think with all these actions all together, Luxembourg is really aiming to be at the forefront of the countries promoting circular economy. And I invite everyone to take a look at our website about circulareconomy.lu, where you will find many more information about what's going on in Luxembourg and details on the strategy. Thank you.
And thank you, Jérôme. What I hear is a very well thought through change process in the strategy, different steps of change, also with concrete examples of action. We'll come back to some of those points later on. But now let me turn to Helen. Let's hear from DSM. So as an ordinary consumer, we might not be that familiar with DSM, but actually DSM's products is really embedded in our everyday life, from food to skincare, to cars, to electronics. So Helen, again, welcome to the session, and we'd love to hear from you what's going on at DSM.
Yeah, thank you, and it's very nice to be here. It's already inspiring to listen to what's going on. So, just a couple of minutes on DSM or Royal DSM. Actually, it's really a very interesting history because 120 years ago we were a coal mining company. Actually, DSM stands for Dutch State Mines. We now say DSM stands for doing something meaningful. And we are a company that has really transformed over a number of years from a coal mining company to a chemical company, a fine chemical company, to a specialty company, to what we actually say we are now, which is a health, nutrition, and sustainable living company. And as you said, the products that we make go into almost everything that you touch as a consumer, whether it is ingredients in food, whether it is vitamins, whether it is skincare, and then also the businesses that I run, which are the materials businesses. They go into your mobile phones, they're in your cars, so they're in your everyday life. And actually, you can imagine then as a company, we have a massive role to play in actually driving the subjects that we're talking about. And actually, as a corporation, as DSM, we are very well known as being a front runner in really driving, let's say, the circular economy within the segments and the spaces that we play in. And the reason that we're seen as a front runner is we don't see this as a separate agenda to what we do and how we do things. Actually, circular is at the heart of everything we do. As a company, what we do, we always step back and say, hey, what are our capabilities? What do we do and what do we make? And how can we best influence the big problems in the world? And of course, one of those big problems in the world is making products that are more linear and not circular. So it really is at the forefront. And we have 22,000 people then working on what they do every day to ensure that we really drive the circular economy, drive the circular developments. And so we're also early in the value chain, and we really feel as a company, we have a responsibility. You know, our retired chairman always likes to say, as a corporation, you can't call yourself successful if the world around you is failing. And I think that really shares a little bit of how and why we are considered a front runner. And we, you know, with that front running there comes responsibility. So we make some very big commitments. So in the world of materials, we've actually committed to 100% bio-based and recycled alternatives in the world of materials today. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor also from a company point of view, but the role that we play, we don't just talk, we really walk the talk. And I think that's why, of course, we feel a responsibility. And we'll share a little bit more as we go through this, the next sessions, what we're doing on some of the KPIs and the collaboration.
Thank you very much, Helen. 100% renewable or recycled. That's a very ambitious target. Yeah. And also thank you to Olivia and Jérôme, which now we have some idea of what's going on at these different levels, economy levels. Olivia, I remember also heard from you that standardization is of paramount importance. So for many of us, when we hear the word standardization, we think of ISO. So it's great to know that ISO is also working on new standards for circular economy. And Catherine, you've been overseeing this work. Could you please share with us what this ISO Technical Committee 323 has been busy with?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you today and to share with you what we are doing at ISO level, because it's very important, as said just before. So the next slide, please. The circular economy, there is a specific technical committee to deal with this topic, which is not an easy one, may I say. And up to now, our scope is really to develop and to publish some standards related to the circular economy, frameworks, guidance, tools, to be able to implement circular economy within organizations, whatever you are private, public organizations, but to be able to understand what circular economy is and to be able to implement that within your organization, to maximize your contribution to the sustainable development. So we up to now, we have in our mindset, the work we have to do is first to answer to an environmental and social emergency and to propose something alternative, another model, economic model, an alternative one, because we know all that the linear economy is not the good one to answer our emergencies. So we have this big job to do. We have to be collaborative to do that. You will see that just after. And we would like to provide also to publish very, very operational standards to be able to implement circular economy. On the bottom of the slide, you can see different members of our technical committee from Helen MacArthur, WBCSD, and so on. Next slide, please. And to show you who is taking part to this job, you can see on the screen the members, current members, and we have members coming from all the parts of the planet, which is very important for us, for me, but which also is not a problem, is how to reach the consensus to be able to write the good text on circular economy. So we are more than 80 countries around the table. Next slide. And now exactly what we are doing, the text we will publish in the coming years. So we will have a first package regarding the what is circular economy. So the definition, I am going to share the definition we already wrote within this standard, the first standard to be published, the ISO 59004. So we will provide the definition of circular economy, we'll provide the principles and the framework for implementation to give everyone a common understanding of what circular economy is. And within this package, we will provide also some text to be able to understand better how to transform your own business model, linear business model, to a circular one, integrating the value network, the value chain, the collaboration between members, the collaboration with your suppliers, and so on. We will also provide something around measurement, because metrics are very important. We have to know where we come from. So we will provide also a framework to measure and assess the circularity at different levels, at product level, at organization levels, and territorial levels. And after that, we have a new group, may I focus on that, represented here by Jérôme Petry, around the product circularity datasheet to be able to better understand what is circular within your product. And as you can see there, each standard is managed by 2 countries coming from different parts of the planet to be able to mix positions and to be able to get the consensus. Next slide. Thank you. And here, as a teasing, maybe for the first standard to be published, the definition of circular economy. It's not yet approved, validated, because within the ISO there is a process, period of ballot for members, for countries, to be able to validate what we are writing. But what we up to now think is circular is what you have on the screen. So for us, the circular economy is an economic system that uses a systemic approach, to maintain a circular flow of resources by regenerating, retaining, or adding to their value, while contributing for sure to sustainable development. We don't have to miss social impact. So it's not only an environmental question, it's also economic, for sure economic, but also social question, to how to involve all interest parties. You have to consider the whole value chain, and may I say value network, so to be more collaborative, to work within a life cycle thinking perspective, to rethink your relationship between your suppliers, startups, and so on. And maybe the main important is how to include within our mindset the long-term economy vision. So not only have a KPI on economic or financial KPI, but also how to include may I say some environmental and social KPI within your vision. And it's a question of mode of production, it's a question of mode of consumption, it's a question of behavior from us, consumer, from companies, and for sure for national at national level also. Next slide. For my last slide, just to give you a quick view about when all the text will be available. For most of them, it will be mid 2023. Maybe you can think it's a long term, but you know, having more than 80 countries around the table to reach a consensus is not so an easy task, and we will have some high quality text to better implement circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the very comprehensive overview. I can imagine getting all the 80 countries to agree on something that must be quite a tough job. And also great to hear that environmental, economic, and social impacts are all included in the consideration. We look forward to the new standards coming out starting from the end of this year. And you mentioned that the work that this product circularity data sheet that Jérôme also mentioned early on is actually also part of that standard. Maybe Jérôme,
right.
Maybe share a bit more about what these data sheets are.
Yes, for sure. So in fact, we started this project in 2018 at the Ministry of Luxembourg, and we developed the idea to create a way of reporting circular data through a statement approach and a decentralized data storage system throughout the whole value chain. So we identified several showstoppers directly from the beginning, where we saw it was very difficult to get relevant information on a product to be able to put it in a new circular business models after its initial life. So in order to be able to maintain product at the highest value, or try to give it a durable life, a second life, or next life, whatever you want to call it in a circular way, we saw that we would have to get all this data. But people were very reluctant to provide it. So we came up with this statement approach. So by identify about 80 statements, which are to be replied with true and false. People are not divulging their confidential and trade secrets just like that, but they're really just answering to these true-false statements. And when you have a true statement, it means that you confirm to that specific statement and that you have to also keep evidence of that statement at your premise. So by that, we automatically create a decentralized storage system. So the information remains at the location of the producer of the product. And only on a specific need-to-know base, you can ask this information, and with a dedicated data exchange protocol, we can exchange that information just for specific occasion. And further to this, the system should allow access to this information for third-party audit. And all this will be enabled by this international standard. So quite rapidly, we understood that we would have to turn to ISO. And we started discussions with Catherine and her team. And we introduced a new work item proposal, which was voted positively. And now we started to work on the working group 5 to create this new standard on the product circularity data sheet, the ISO 59040. And it's really going in two separate parts. So one part will be the handling of the PCDS, how you reply to these standards, how this true-false statement is functioning, how you exchange the data, how you make it available for the auditing. And then the second part is more the content of the statement. So we want to define a basic set of requirements which would be valid for all products, and then together with that provide a toolbox which helps you to generate your own statements, which will then be very sector specific, because it will be, I think, almost impossible to have one data template which fits all products all over the world. So we need to have that kind of flexibility and find a fine balance between what is a requirement and what is then sector specific, to first avoid greenwashing of the statements, but then on the second hand, to take into account all the differences which are from one product to another, from one sector to another one. Important is that we want this to be a bottom-up approach. So it starts really at the producer of the base material. And so it's not always known in what sector the product is going. So that is a little bit tricky right now, but we have a lot of experts around us helping us to write these standards. So it's a quite exciting time right now. And we see also a lot of engagement from international platforms on this. And we see that the statement approach is interesting, because it leverage that specific showstopper of not wanting to divulge specific information, and that could be a way to feed in a lot of important basic information into a future digital product passport, which are a very hot topic here in Europe right now, but probably also all over the world, in order to enable circular economy and have a large gain for the end consumer of these kind of products.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Jérôme. And data availability, data access is indeed identified as one of the major gaps or challenges, also in some of the recent landscaping paper on CE metrics. Thank you for sharing your experience there. Very interesting. And Catherine, if I may turn back to you, but now with your other hat on as a CE and climate manager at Suez. So once all these wonderful standards are out, how will Suez use them?
Good question. We are taking into account circular economy right now, because we know that we have to take into account the planet boundaries, as all the industries, not only Suez, and circular economy is in our DNA, may I say. I just remind that our activities, we produce 4.1 million tons of secondary raw materials. We produce also 2.2 billion cubic meter of reuse water. So we are within the circular economy, but the implementation we are doing right now about that is to better understand the link we can do, the more collaborative way we can do our job to be able to push this kind of reuse, recycle, recovering for all materials, and for the loop to be more effective. We also implement some KPIs within our way of doing, within our reporting. So taking part to this job around the circular economy at ISO level help us to be more efficient. How to integrate circular economy within our activities, to better monitor, to better assess what we are doing, and after that to better implement a dedicated action plan, to be able to push our customer, also to push our suppliers, and to be more collaborative along the value chain, and to consider the value chain.
Thank you. I'm sure Suez will become a role model in adopting and applying these standards in operations. Helen, I'm curious to hear from you whether you have any other ideas of, for example, how DSM will apply these standards. You also mentioned earlier that you have some great examples of indicator work at DSM. I know DSM is very active in multiple CE metrics initiatives, for example, the CTI, the circular transition indicators. Could you please tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think also I see some of the questions coming through, because I think a lot of people now understand when we talk about circular economy, what it is that we're talking about in terms of a circular economy. But if you think about how well are companies doing within that circular economy, it is actually really difficult to have a sensible conversation about it. And I think from a corporate point of view, we always say what gets measured gets done. And, you know, if you look at companies across the world, financial metrics are standard. There's different ways to manage your sales growth, your financial performance, etc. But when it comes to actually the circular language, then there is no common platform, and therefore it gets very difficult actually to drive companies forward and to drive your business forward. So that's why we are personally very passionate as one of the front runners to play a role actually in enabling that standardization, in actually participating in developing that framework. So actually we've taken a lead role in the circular transition index work, together with another 30 companies. And, you know, I think how we're actually piloting it within our own company. And very practically, what we're doing is, you know, we're looking at all of the inputs that we have into the company. So everything that we are purchasing, and we're measuring it based on, you know, is it fossil, is it bio, where is it, and putting some measurements around it. Then we're also looking at everything that goes out of our company and where does it land, and can it be recycled, can it be reused or not? And actually then we start looking at where the gaps are. And from there, you start developing roadmaps on how to address it. And I think what we're learning through this pilot is it's as much about the conversation that it then drives across the value chain. And I'll just give you a couple of examples, because one of the materials businesses, it's a very strong brand name called Dyneema. Dyneema is the world's strongest fiber. And with it being the world's strongest fiber, it lasts for a very, very long time. It's also extremely lightweight. So it has a lot of big advantages. However, its disadvantage is that it's not fully recyclable. So actually, through the work that we were doing on the indices, we said, hey, we've got a great technology, we've got a great product, it's got a lot of pros, but where is it in the full circularity? It's not there yet. So we actually went to the whole value chain and said, you know, what we're looking at is how do we put more bio-based materials into it, but also how do we really make this a circular portfolio? And we have now 20 companies across the entire value chain, we call it our coalition, that's working on how to create a fully circular product portfolio. And, you know, for me, it is really interesting that what you think is impossible, already we're finding that there are things that are possible. So when you know what the problem is that you're trying to solve, then a lot of companies have the science, the capabilities, the people to actually solve it. So for me, this is really incredible when you start to do this work. Now, what I will say is, you know, we're very much into transparency and traceability as a company. You know, that's what we think really drives this circular performance forward. So there's no right or wrong right now, but we are, you know, really starting to measure it, to drive, you know, to drive the conversation. And I do think, you know, this is where you cannot do this alone. And I really do think it takes leadership, because we do have to standardize on things. We do have to, you know, I say, hey, it's like everything. You can spend a lot of time on trying to get the measures in place, but it's the actions that drive the results that are the important things to get moving. So that's where we are. I feel, you know, immensely proud of the work that's going on, and it's across value chains. It's across the people who are here today, in terms of making a difference in driving not just companies, but countries and the world forward in the challenge here. And of course, I've got lots more of examples. If we get more time to actually share, very happy to do so. I think that's, you know, a key message on what the indicators are doing is driving the action.
Thank you, Helen. I wish we would have more time. I also liked what you said, that we cannot do this alone. I hear people say again and again, we need to work together, we need to coordinate our efforts so we can paddle together towards the common goal more effectively. Since a couple of years ago, Circular Economy and PACE have been hosting the Circular Economy Indicators Coalition, exactly for that purpose, right? To create a space for the developers and the users of CE metrics from both public and private sectors to exchange, to coordinate, and to address some of the common barriers. And today we have Mark. Mark is the Director of Strategic Alliances at Circular Economy. Mark, could you maybe please give us first a very, very brief recap of the history of the coalition? Oh, Mark is frozen. Okay. I hope Mark will be back with us soon. Maybe we can start already moving into some of the Q&As from, oh, Mark, are you back? Are you back? Are you back?
I am back. I am back.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Did you hear my question? I was wondering whether you can give us a brief recap of the history of the CEIC coalition.
Absolutely, with pleasure, and great to be here. Yeah, I think, I mean, we have seen the emergence of the circular economy topic almost for a decade. I think 5 years ago, around that time, much more prominent discussion about metrics and measuring circularity. But really the idea for the Circular Economy Indicator Coalition started in January of 2019, when there was a big convening in The Hague with all organizations present also on this call and many that I see participating in the discussion today. And we really had the idea that there was the need for this indicator coalition to exchange the best practices, to also provide a bit of a kind of a repository of where can we find the best indicators out there, but also to drive very proactive change in specific fields. And that was really where I think in April of this year, during the World Circular Economy Forum Plus Climate, there was a strong action statement announced where many of the participants really felt that we needed to formalize that more. Obviously, in close collaboration with all of the great initiatives that we have heard many on the call comment to. So that was really, I would say, kind of in big strokes, from good discussions to kind of more formalization around that indicator coalition.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Well, April, that was 5 months ago, right? Not a very long time ago. Has there already been any news, new updates from the coalition? And if we also look forward, look ahead, what can we expect to hear from the coalition?
Yeah, what we have done in the last half year or so is looked at kind of what, in terms of private sector metrics, but also public sector metrics, what is the field? So how can we look at the current landscape? And what we've published are 2 reports where we have been, based on interviews with many of the stakeholders in both fields, look a bit at where do we currently stand and where are, let's say, the biggest blind spots to move forward. And what we have been doing on that basis, and that is the translation to looking towards the future, is set up the coalition with very useful funding from philanthropy so far, and we're seeking to build that out, but to look at 3 things. So on the one hand, we are shaping 3 specific coalitions around topics like metrics for the financial industry, looking at accounting metrics, for example, looking at national level policy metrics. So what could be helpful in setting your national level ambitions? Of course, we've heard Jérôme speak about that, and also Olivia in the context of the European Commission and Luxembourg specifically. And there are many other examples, but also countries that are coming to that field, that want to learn and that want to know what to do. And lastly, also specifically around employment metrics. So in this transition, what is the role of employment? What is the role of education? And also of upskilling and reskilling current staff that we have, which is a very much needed in this transition, and how can we put hard metrics and measurement under that? So in summary, we want to play that convening role. We want to provide a repository that people can turn to get up to speed with the absolute latest. And lastly, have these very specific groups of practitioners that set their teeth in these tangible ways where we want to move the field forward.
Thank you, Mark. Big plans ahead. I see we have already quite some questions from the audience in the chat box, so let me pick out a few. Catherine, we have a question from Reinhardt to you. It says, there are many sets of indicators on CE. Which added benefits would ISO standards have? And do you expect that other sets of indicators will be superseded by the ISO standards?
No, the ISO standard is there to try to find a consensus with different countries coming from different geographies, and to be able to share the same understanding of a topic. So regarding metrics, for sure, the standard dedicated to metrics will give you a framework to be able to take into account the right metrics depending the level you want to apply it. At organization level, at territorial level, at product level, and so on. And these all initiatives are welcome. Just other initiatives can be there, and it's okay. Just that you have to know that ISO standard is something able to be implemented by all the countries. In fact, it's a soft law. It's not mandatory, but it gives you some a basis to take into account the right metrics for the right level of monitoring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Olivia, I know standardization is a topic very close to your heart, and the Commission is doing a lot of work on standardization. So also curious to hear about your thoughts on, how would the EU standards link to the ISO standards? Olivia?
Yes. So ISO standards could help assessing, defining if a product is circular, if it meets some key principles criteria, and for sure they would have an impact on defining circular business. I'm not really in a position to dwell more into details, but I would like just to recall the importance of European standards that are identical in all 34 members of SEN and SNELEC, and thus they can create an easy access to the European market, and they can also have an impact at global level if they become international at ISO or at IEC level, are adopted in countries outside Europe. So in a nutshell, standards are important tools to connect EU, national and business level, and they are really interlinked with development of CE indicators.
Thank you, Olivia. Jérôme, we have a question from Stephanie to you. It says, which indicators or metrics should the regulators or the public sector be considering to manage harmful chemicals, waste, and pollutants from the private sector? It was addressed to you, but others, please do feel free to chip in.
Yeah, I think that question specifically, when looking at Luxembourg being a European country, I think these are topics which are handled at European level. So the national government do no longer, I would say, look into the details, but are really there looking at what's being implemented at European level and transfer that in their laws. So I'm thinking of different regulations out there, like REACH or the new SKIP database. So there's a lot going on at the ECA level, which is being followed by Europe. There are other things going on a worldwide level, but I think this is the main regulations to look at in terms of harmful substances right now.
Thank you. Any other speakers would like to add anything at this point?
Maybe what I can add is, we as a corporation, we value when these regulations are put in place, because again, I think it comes down to then, when you ban substances or you move a country or a company along, then I'm always surprised at how you can find the innovation, how you can find the solutions to actually address, and I think, one thing that for me always gives me hope in the subjects that we're talking about now is I can always remember quite a long time ago when we were talking about climate, and we were talking about how do you start measuring greenhouse gases as companies, etc. And if you just take a step back now, that has moved on, and companies know how to do these things. And I also think, I just want to share that also gives me, also with my organization, the positivity that these things, when you're starting out on things, it starts a bit, it feels a bit more complicated, but as you move forward, these things become something that you actually hardly discuss anymore, and we move on to the next one. But I do think policy and regulations actually really, for me, they drive the speed, and they also, they drive a level of transparency and a playing field that companies play in.
Great to hear that the private sector welcomes.
Maybe if I can add something regarding the waste. When you have to implement circular economy, principle of circular economy within your organization, for sure you have to integrate eco-design, you have to integrate sustainable sourcing, you have to think about the end of life, or may I say the new life management of your waste. So at the end of the day, I will not say that you will have no waste, but because up to now you have hazardous waste, not hazardous waste, so it's very difficult. But by implementing circular economy within your organization, you will reduce the waste you will produce. So you will take into account that to be able to better reuse, to better recycle, to better recover. Yeah. So using metrics will be good for that also.
Yeah, great point. Mark, there's a question from Michiel to you. Are CE KPIs or sector or theme specific? Is it specific for plastics, specific for electronics, or are there also overarching ones?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So what we, at least in our landscaping assessment, found is that we need to distinguish, and I actually saw some references to that also in the chat, on certain levels of metrics. So on the one hand, you can, when looking at a whole value chain or a whole country looking at their circularity or moving into a specific sector or product level, we need to distinguish between that. So I think definitely we can have, let's say, high level metrics that should actually be applicable on all of these different levels across sectors. But we will definitely, and I think Jérôme also mentioned that in his contribution, that there will also, when going to the product level and more zooming in, ones that should be extremely context dependent to be of value. So it's maybe not a very satisfying answer, because there is this big diversity needed to be fit for purpose in different circumstances. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, indeed. I also think, how do we hit this balance between simplicity and complexity, right? We all know that circular economy is complex. Most of us agree it won't be described by a single metric. But on the other hand, a simple single metric is very effective in communication. I think there was John had a point in the chat box. How can we make circular economy understandable just by an average citizen, right? So so maybe Helen, as you said, it's like climate change. We start with a high level of complexity, And as we learn, it will become more streamlined and simple.
Yeah. But I want to add, because Mark, I fully agree with you. I think the framework is good, absolutely. But the most important thing, we shouldn't get right now too hung up about trying to compare, etc. What we want is we want companies, countries to actually start taking the action that is required to bridge the gaps. And for me, that's what the framework actually does. It provides the framework, you start the measuring, then you start your conversations and your action plans. And I think as a company, what's important for me is to make sure that, you know, if I just take Royal DSM, that we're making progress, that we're moving things forward. And then there will be a point. I think there will be a point of convergence at some point in time as we're learning and as we're sharing, that maybe there are some of the metrics that you can start then benchmarking and comparing. Because I do think at some point, if you can benchmark and you can compare, then you accelerate. But I think right now where we are on this journey, you know, how Mark described it is exactly the right way to ensure that things are moving forward.
Yeah, I think we've been spending most of this hour on how can we do things right. That's also the starting point of this session. But of course, there's also urgency. So we also need to make the transition fast. So maybe the very last question for all of you, all the speakers, is, you know, what more is needed in order for us to move faster in the transition, right? You know, set the right targets, be able to track them accurately. But how can we do that faster? And Helen, I think you already mentioned some of that. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, maybe just a very quick one, and then I'll hand it over. You know what I think it actually takes? I think some of these things take courage, and they take courage to keep having the conversations and to get out there and to do things and to push forward. And I think that then requires courageous leadership that is very collaborative in the style, because I'll come back to these things cannot be done alone. And I think that's actually quite a mindset shift on how we work in general. So for me, courageous leadership is something that really is needed to keep pushing with speed. I think a lot of companies now talk about this as the decade of action. And that's, you know, that requires leadership and it requires courage.
Yeah, great. May I move to Jérôme?
Yes, very inspiring what you just said, Helen. I think what we see from our effort on the strategy is that we need to identify the roadblocks, the showstopper, and try with policies to get them out of the way. And today, a lot of things are still set up for a linear economy, specifically on accounting in a company, how you amortize assets. So there are still a lot of things which are really fit for a linear economy, and we need to get our hands around that and try to find another way to tackle that. I saw in the chat a question about VAT. That's definitely topics which are, out there.
We'll have to cut you, Jérôme.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, so we can hear from Olivia as well. Olivia, what will be your pick to move faster? One sentence or two, maybe.
So in order to continue going forward and quickly with circular economy, policymakers, public sector and private sector need to work hand in hand to fill data gaps and this kind of things. So that's, I mean, we cannot succeed alone, either business or public sector.
Great, thank you. And Catherine?
Yes, to me, we have to account companies' revenues, taking into account the triple bottom line to balance the economic KPIs, to be able to better integrate environmental externalities and social externalities, and to integrate, as we did with the shadow price of carbon, for instance, but to reinforce that with other KPIs.
Very good. Mark?
Yeah, I think we need to embrace everyone on this journey. So to move at speed and scale, we have seen a lot of speak of front runners, but I think we also need to take the organizations and the countries along that are not the front runners, but that want to become a front runner. So embrace everyone, on the journey.
Very good. Courageous leadership, policy incentives, collaboration, triple bottom line, inclusiveness, and embrace. Thank you. Let's end with that. And thank you very much, all the speakers. Thank you, the audience. I wish you a very nice rest of the day and enjoy the rest of WCF. Bye-bye.